Hey everybody, it's your buddy Brian coming at you with another quick and dirty, totally unprofessional RPG review. This one is the Eldritch Hack by Dan Masters, aka Professor Dungeon Master on the popular YouTube channel Dungeon Craft. This is Dan Masters' take on a Lovecraftian cosmic horror. It's a rules light horror RPG. I really like that it's rules light because the older that I get, the less amount of time that I have to be fumbling through rules books that are hundreds and hundreds of pages long, and that when you have to do that, you're breaking immersion, you're slowing the game down. I really do appreciate these rules light games that provide very simple, solid rules from which you can then springboard and take your adventure in different directions, rather than having all the minutia there in the rule book covering hundreds and hundreds of pages, which makes it a slog to have to read through and run at the table. At least that's my take as I get older. I want smaller, simpler, slimmer, leaner, meaner games is what I want as I get on in long in the tooth. So last month I looked at Old Ones, Shoggoths, and Rillier by William King, which is another similarly very slim, two sides of one page RPG, D20 based, old school style Lovecraftian RPG. Now we're looking at Dan Masters' Eldritch Hack, which is a similar, very similar in the sense that it's a very rules light, minimalist game, and is also D20 based. It does have a scenario included. It's a little thicker than the other game because you have the rules here. We'll look at the rules. There's also an included scenario. We're going to go very lightly on this. I don't want to give away any spoilers in case you end up playing this game and playing through this scenario, Cloak House. We don't want to give away any spoilers. I may reference it a little bit, but we're going to try to keep it really light so that everybody has a good time. I apologize for the sheen. I've put this whole thing in a protective binder with individual sheet protectors, so that is going to give a bit of a glare. I apologize for that, but that's to show you, like, I really do like this game. I wouldn't take the trouble to print this and put it in a protective binder if I didn't like it, but I do like it, so here we go. I have some comments, a few critical comments, but we'll get to those. But this is a very good game. So let's take a look. Okay, we got our credits page here, written by Dan Masters. We get some additional writing and layout by Jason McDonald, editing by Christina Stiles. A couple of other credits there, very nice. You get your table of contents. You can see the whole thing is the rules cover. There's only about 20 pages of rules, and that is a bit of a false impression because as we get into it, as we'll see, there's a lot of great art in here, and it's easy to digest. So we're not going to go through everything, but nice little introduction here, a little bit about H.P. Lovecraft. Here's the rules. I mean, the rules really are, they are very simple rules. It's a D20 based game, and you're looking to hit a target number, anywhere from 5 being a very easy task, all the way up to a 20 being something that you're going to be highly unlikely to accomplish. So that's it. You meet or beat the target number. You're rolling a D20, and there you go. There is a where is it here? Dan right here is pointing out, is that it? And there's really, he says, there's one rule, and that is, in game masters we trust. The game master is the ultimate interpreter and arbiter of the rules, and can change things as long as everybody's having a good time. And so he just lays that right out there, that we're just trusting in the game master to make fair rules, fair rulings, and we go from there. And that's great. So the rest of this is all just expounding on that. But there's your basic mechanic, is hitting a difficulty number. Now let's look here. Now you'll see the character sheet, as an example of the character sheet. This character creation, what's wonderful about this game, like some of the other minimalist games, it takes you about 5 minutes or less to create a character. There are 4 stats in this game, only 4. Skill, hit points, lore, and sanity. All right. Now, skill is going to be a number between 1 and 6, and you're going to roll for that number. And I've done this a bunch of times, and typically you're going to get probably a 4 or 5 or a 6 on that number. What you're doing is you're picking an occupation for your character, and anytime that your character tries to do something that is in their wheelhouse of skills or expertise, they're going to add that skill rating to it. So if you have a character who is a police detective, and that police detective is interrogating a suspect, you would roll the d20 and you would add your skill number to that d20 roll to get your final number. Now remember, all the DM is doing, all the referee is doing, is coming up with a number here, a difficulty number. So let's say that interrogating that suspect is well, the default is 10. So, but let's say this is a guy that doesn't want to talk. You might say, well, that would be difficult. So somebody who's not skilled, like let's say a librarian, interrogating that subject would have to roll a 15 unaided by anything, just a basic d20 roll with no modifiers. But let's say that the librarian's friend, the police detective, also interrogates that subject. The police detective would probably have maybe a 5 or a 4 or 5, maybe even a 6 in this skill rating, and would add that to their d20 roll, thus increasing their chances of getting successfully interrogating that person. So you get the idea. Same thing with, like, say, climbing a fence or driving a car. You wouldn't need to roll for just driving the car down the street, but if it was a car chase, a professional driver, race car driver, would add their skill to that driving roll, whereas your typical antiquarian or a lifeguard, whatever you are, that's not a person skilled at driving, they're not going to put that in there. Hit points. You're going to have a hit points on scale with Call of Cthulhu, because this game is it's not a direct clone, of course. It's its own system. But Dan is writing this, I believe, with the assumption that you're familiar with Call of Cthulhu, and you may even want to take adventures from Call of Cthulhu and run them in this system. So the hit point scale is compatible with Call of Cthulhu. So you're looking at characters with maybe 12, 13 hit points, somewhere in there. You're just making a couple of quick dice rolls to come up with these numbers. Lore is the sort of secrets of the universe, the cosmic secrets of the universe. So that starts out at 0. You only earn lore points as you run into horrific entities and you learn dreadful secrets, or you find forbidden books, and you're going to go up in lore. And then sanity. Sanity is not directly compatible with Call of Cthulhu. It is it's not a 1 to 100 scale like it is in Call of Cthulhu, which is the granddaddy and most well-known of all cosmic horror RPGs. But this one typically runs you, anywhere from about maybe 6 to 9 sanity points. So you have about 6 to 9 sanity points. So usually when you run into something horrific, you are losing maybe a point or two. You're not losing 6 or 8 sanity points at a go. You're going to lose maybe a point or two. So that's an easy modification. If someone is used to running other games, you just lower the sanity toll for running into things, and you're all right. And that's it. That's pretty much your character right there. Those 4 things. You don't worry about money. Dan Masters says, this is a game about horror, not bean counting. I really, really appreciate that, because I've seen cosmic horror games that spend pages and pages and pages of time about resource gathering, tabulating your money, tabulating how difficult it would be to scrounge up equipment and blah, blah, blah. Who needs that? Like Dan says in one of his YouTube videos, like, we don't see Indiana Jones saving up to buy a plane ticket. We don't see that happening. Why would we want to spend time on it? Just assume that the characters have enough to get around and do what they need to do. Same thing with equipment, right? Just write it in over here. Like if you're if you're an Indiana Jones type archaeologist and you want to have a fedora and a pistol and maybe a a magnifying glass or a little brush, put it in there. I mean, if somebody says, yeah, I want a nuclear particle accelerator, then you can say, well, no. Or I want to have the Batmobile. You'd say, no. But it might make sense that you have a Jeep that you're running around in, or you have a little motorcycle or something. It trusts the game master and the players to make those decisions to be genre appropriate and focuses the energy and the rules on the very few things that make a good story run and that you can master very quickly to run a game. You're not worried about doing it right or playing the rules right. So that's nice. Here we get into the occupations. Dan gives some sample occupations, and you'll see that there are some skills. So you say, well, I'm a medical doctor. Okay, great. So you would take your skill rating right here, like when you roll and again, your skill rating is probably going to be around 4 to 6. And you're going to add that to any D20 roll if you're a doctor, a medical doctor, when you need to make a medical diagnosis or apply first aid. And you can see there are he's got some suggested skills. And these suggested skills, typically you might have 5 or 6 of these under each occupation. Like here's private investigator, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So those are the things that a private investigator would add their skill rating to. And these are kind of fast and loose because you might have a doctor that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe that doctor, in addition to all these medical things, maybe this doctor likes to play the piano. So this doctor also is skilled in playing the piano. Or maybe this doctor is also a stamp collector. So this doctor might be skilled in knowing certain stamps and postal stuff. I mean, I'm just making this up on the fly, but you get the idea. It's usually about 5 or 6 things in total. Yeah, players may list 5 or 6 skills on their character sheet. These include the skills suggested by their occupation and 2 or 3 others, subject to the game master's permission. So this is to show that, if you're a doctor, yes, you're going to be skilled in these things, but you're also a human being that is going to be knowledgeable in maybe a couple of other things, hobbies or life experience things. Maybe your doctor rides horseback on the weekends, so the doctor would have that, how to ride horses and manage horses, that sort of thing. Maybe your antiquarian has a motorcycle that they buzz around in. So you would say, okay, they've got these types of things, and they've also got motorcycle. And again, that's all based on your skill. You just take that same number and you're going to apply it to anything that is part of your occupation, your skills. So again, very simple, very fast, very clean. Okay, so here we go. This is a wonderful, I've used this page more than anything. I've used this in different games. Dan gives names for characters. This is perfect because whether you're generating a name for your own character or you're the game master, and somebody says, I go into the ice cream parlor, what's the name of the soda jerk? What's the name of the guy behind the counter? The GM doesn't have to panic. He can say, his name's Bradley. Okay, I keep this at the ready for any time I need to, or, we jump in the taxi. And what's the taxi driver's name? Okay, the taxi driver's name is Conrad. Okay, sure. This game is for the 1920s through the 1950s. It's sort of a classic era Call of Cthulhu. So you could, not Call of Cthulhu. I would use it with classic era Call of Cthulhu. That's what I would use it for. And it's sort of aimed at being compatible with Call of Cthulhu, and most of their games are set in the jazz era. So Dan has sort of set the thing up to have names and things for that era. Same thing with like skills that are on the list here. You won't see like computer hacking or cyber robotics or whatever. But there's nothing in this game that says you couldn't run your game forward into the far future or bring it back into the ancient past, the Bronze Age. Come up with a Roman soldier and come up with some skills for a Roman soldier, or come up with a cyber mercenary in cyber tech. and and go that route. But as written and as themed, it's very classic era games, classic 1920s, 1930s jazz era. That's how I'm going to use it with a lot of my published stuff that I have in Call of Cthulhu and other games. So anyway, this is great for both players and game masters to have this name stuff right here, this name generator. Super helpful, because nothing breaks immersion than, I wander up to the socialite at the bar and I ask her name, and the game master says, it's Louise. Oh, okay, well, what's Louise's last name? Nice to meet you, Louise. What's your last, do I know your family? What's your last name? Here, the game master can rattle right off. Fairchild. My name's Louise Fairchild, or whatever. Very, very smooth. Then we go into the game master section. We have the weapons for the game. Goes through melee weapons, unarmed, firearms. Now, Dan does say he doesn't have Thompson submachine gun listed or machine guns listed, because he says the sort of aesthetic of the game are academics and socialites and private investigators, typically not running around with Tommy guns. I would have included them. This is one of my little critical comments. I would have included them, because I've had players that say, well, I want to play a veteran of the Great War, and my character would have brought home a Tommy gun, or smuggled home a Tommy gun from the trenches. Or I want to play a gangster. I want to play a gangster character, and I have a Tommy gun, a prized weapon. So, or you could play an antiquarian or a librarian, more typical Lovecraftian characters that, maybe they're searching a warehouse by the docks, and they encounter contraband weaponry, something like that, or they show up somewhere where there is a machine gun. I think I would have put that in there for completeness. It's just such a simple system. I mean, you could take the firearms list as written and put it right in there. Just make it a higher damage rating. And there you go. I mean, and maybe multiple shots per round. Maybe, you can use, he does have a multiple rounds ruling here. So it would be very easy to add that in. But I just would have included that, because I've known plenty of characters over my time playing these types of games that want to get their hands on automatic weaponry if it fits the character. And honestly, if you're running up against a Shoggoth or a horde of deep ones coming up the beach after you, have all the firearms you want, have all the machine guns you want. It's not going to do a darn thing if you've got, the creature from the blobby creature from the well coming up after you that doesn't take a lot of damage or any damage from firearms. Just give them their sense of false security and then blow it away with what the monsters can do. All right, combat. Very simple combat. Again, you're rolling a d20, hoping to hit the target number. And again, the target is typically the base number is 10. See, hitting targets, the base target number needed to hit is 10, and then the game master can raise or lower that based on conditions. One thing I would have put in here is it's not specified. I guess it's assumed, so maybe I should just assume it and just go with it. Is do you add your, if you're a character that's skilled in combat, so let's say I have a boxer. Let's say I have a character who's an ex-boxer, pugilist. Do they add their skill to this base 10 as their defense number? Because you are rolling, the game master is rolling for the monsters to allow the monsters to strike the players. So if a player, if a boxer wants to punch a deep one in the face, let's give the deep one, the basic target number is 10, and then the boxer would add their skill rating. So they would roll a d20, maybe they add 4 or 5 or 6 to that number to try to punch the deep one in the face. But then let's say that the deep one takes a jab back at the boxer or takes a swipe with a claw, something like that. Is it a 10, or does the boxer add their skill number to the 10 to represent being skilled in unarmed combat, including defense? Same thing if a character has a high dodge skill. Let's say I have a character that's used to dodging. Maybe he's an athlete, or maybe a back alley criminal that's used to getting out of the way of scrapes, getting out of scrapes. When somebody throws a rock at that character, would that mean that instead of using a 10 as the base, I use 10 plus their skill rating? I think so, but it's not stated here. So I think I would have added that here. Something about, just a line about adding your skill rating or not to the defense as well as the strike, and the attack. I'm going to assume that that's how it works, but it's not specific here. Then we're looking, okay, damage is very nice, very simple game. If you are brought down to 0 hit points, if it's exactly 0, you're knocked unconscious. If it's less than 0, you roll on this quick chart. Sanity. What would any Lovecraftian horror game be without fear and sanity tests? Something that Dan does here that's very, very nice and very agreeable. You lose, like many Lovecraftian games, if you run into a monster or horrific situation, you're making a sanity test. The game master assigns a number between 10 and 20. You roll a d20. If your sanity score is 5 or higher, you get to add a +1 bonus to that roll. And if you pass it, you take your turn, you do your thing. If you lose your sanity test, you're stunned for just one round, probably standing there horrified or just dumbfounded, and you lose sanity points designated by the creature or encounter. And that's it. We're not running off screaming into the night. We are not frozen for the entire encounter, turned into a fetal, sort of curling up into a fetal ball, because you want to give the players agency. So this represents them seeing something horrible, responding to that, maybe losing some sanity to that, maybe losing one round of activity, but it doesn't take them out of the scene entirely. It gives them agency to do what they want to do in the scene while representing. You trust your players to represent their fear, to portray their fear, and I think that's brilliant. I think that's wonderful. So if you go down to 0 sanity, there's you can roll on a d20, and there's a bit of what happens there. So you can be taken out of the game if your sanity reaches 0. And again, sanity is going to run about 6 to 9 points. So when you see monsters, they're typically, or see horrible things, it might run you like a sanity loss of 1 or maybe 2 points. Maybe in an extreme situation, maybe 1d4 or even 1d6 if you're seeing something really horrible. But rules as written, it's about 1 to 2 points, because again, you only have about 6 to 9 of these sanity points to play with before you hit 0. And there are ways to recover both physical damage and sanity. I like this recovery. Resting characters recover 1 hit point per day. There's additional rules if you're attended to by a medical professional or go to the hospital, but you're not going to bounce back after 1 night of rest. You're not going to get eviscerated by some monster in its claws or its teeth or its poison spittle, and then the next morning kind of wake up and say, well, that was terrible, I feel fine. No, you're going to have a slow drip recovery on your hit points. And sanity, the same thing. It's you can spend some time with a mental health professional, but it's slow recovery to get those points back, to represent that you've really gone through some shocks that have battered your mental system. You can be put in a sanitarium. Again, this is extreme, but you can recover sanity that way. We move quickly into rewards, lore, and spells, okay? Rewards for a successful adventure, and that might just mean surviving. That might not mean, unlike Dungeons & Dragons, you might not beat the dungeon, but you might just survive. So what happens here is you're going to test against your skill. You're going to see if your skill goes up. It's a very simple roll of a d6 die, and your skill might go up by 1. And skills top off at 6. So you're never going to get better than a 6. You can never add more than 6 to a d20 roll based off your skill. You might gain a few sanity points. The dungeon master, the game master might say, okay, in addition to any of this stuff that you might want to go seek help, you survived the adventure, you did well, I'm going to give you some sanity points to represent that you did well, and that helps you with your stability. And you might gain 1 lore as you've gone through a horrific adventure and learned the true secrets of the cosmos. You might gain 1 lore. Okay? You can also gain lore by reading forbidden manuscripts. That's a form of treasure, although it might be dubious treasure. These are cursed books. So you could find one of these in one of your investigations. And as you can see, if you read this one, this is Book of Azathoth, you're going to take off 1 point of sanity because the book is so spooky and horrible to read, but you're going to be rewarded with 1 more lore point. And you would use lore when you see creatures of the mythos, or you see evidence of spooky cosmic horror activity. You're going to roll your lore on a d20 and try to figure out what's going on. Use that to try to figure out what's going on. And again, the game master is assigning a number, probably somewhere between 10 and 20, to help you with that, to give a target number that you have to meet or beat. Okay, magic and spell casting, super simple, super easy, although I am critical of it in one respect, and I'll say what that is. Okay, Dan says spells exist. They're mostly used by evil cultists. Casting a spell requires a target number of 15. So you hit that 15, you actually roll the d20, you add your lore, and if you get a 15 or higher, the spell goes off, and the spell does what the game master says it does. Okay, that's very simple. Okay. Oh, also, if you roll a natural 1, then something horrible happens. In this game, if you roll a natural 1, that's a fumble on what you're trying to do. And if you roll a natural 20, that's like an extraordinary success. So for combat, it's double damage. Whereas if you roll a 1, that's a fumble. You might drop your weapon. Same thing with magic and spell casting. If you roll a d20, you could say, well, you get a really good version of the spell. Or if you roll a natural 1, it's horrific. Something really bad happens when you fumble the spell, and there's a couple of suggestions here. One thing that I was confused about, and I think this could have used another line or two of explication, do the bad guys also roll for this? Okay, I get it that when a character gets their hands on a spell and wants to cast a spell, they're going to need to roll, add their lore, and get a 15 or higher. But what if I'm an evil sorcerer, a non-player character, sorcerer, wizard, or creature? Do I have to roll for that or not? Or does it just sort of happen? All right. And then if I do roll for it as the person representing the monsters in this case, there's no resistance here on the part of the player. So if I'm a creature, let's say I'm a horrible monster that can mind blast characters and hypnotize them, make them do my will. I roll a number. Let's say I get the number I want. There's nothing in here about the players getting a defensive roll. Like, do they also have to roll a 15 to shake off that effect? Or is it just, okay, too bad, the monster made their roll, the evil sorcerer made their roll, too bad, it happens to you? Or does the player get some kind of a saving throw? Or conversely, maybe does the monster automatically succeed with their spell casting, but then the player has to roll a target number of 15 to resist that spell. So I can say that horrible monster in the cellar that casts mental hypnosis on you, a dominate spell, it just goes off, and you as the investigator or the player character, now you have to just make the save. I don't know how that works here. So it's a little bit ambiguous. As written, it would seem that everybody rolls, including the monsters, and then if they succeed in the number, that's it. There's no fallback for the person affected, the player or the monster, to resist. So I would have liked a line or two, or just a sentence in there to clarify that. If we look in the Adventure Cloak House, and I don't want to go too far into this because that would be, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but there is a monster here in this game, in the adventure, and one of his things is mind control. Body switching. It's a spell, and it says that the monster uses this spell, and that the target must make a save difficulty of 15. And if the target fails, their mind is extinguished, and the monster takes control of their body. So here, it's just saying that it just sort of happens. There's no, the monster doesn't have to make a roll. for their spell to go off, it's the player character, the player making a roll to save against the effect of the spell. Okay, so that's confusing to me because as I read the rules, it says make a skill roll difficulty of 15 to make the spell go off, and then there's no recourse if the spell impacts you on the other side. You know, if you're on the receiving end, there's nothing in there about any kind of recourse. But so it makes it sound like, okay, only the person doing the action is the actor is doing it, not the reactor. But if you go into the adventure later on and you see what the monster does, it's the complete opposite. So I would have liked some kind of explication as to why it's one way here, but it's a different way in the adventure. I think that's a bit of an oops and an oversight that could really be figured out, needs to be figured out, especially because you're dealing with a game that this is all about cosmic horror and monsters and magic. So I would definitely clarify that. Who is making the roll to do the thing, and then who gets to resist, if they get to resist. So as a dungeon master or a game master, I can figure that out on my own. Maybe that's the intent. I can be fast and loose with it and say who does what. But I just wanted something for baseline consistency, and I'm not getting it here. I think that could use another go-round editorial pass. Okay, then we've got, so that's it really. Then we got a nice section on designing scenarios, on how to put these things together, all the elements of an adventure. Then he actually gives an example, Dan Masters gives an example of how you would put these elements together into, and actually puts a skeleton of a scenario together. Isn't that wonderful? So that's a great thing. Okay, then we're gonna go, running the game, just some advice on running the game, searching for clues. He advises, this is the all important, you don't want the whole game coming to a screeching halt because somebody failed their search roll. If there's a clue to be found somewhere and the player investigators, the player characters are searching in that area for that clue or a clue, let them find it so that the game can progress, the story can progress. You don't want them to be bored and frustrated and flummoxed simply because they didn't roll high enough, okay? So if they search the bureau or the behind the lamp shade or behind the bookcase and there's something supposed to be there, don't hang it up on a D20 roll. Just let them find it. Same thing with like driving. You know, if they need to drive to the supermarket for something, you're not going to make them have them make a D20 roll and, oh, you failed your drive roll, you can't get to the supermarket. That's ridiculous. Same thing here. If they're searching and they're being diligent, the players are being diligent, don't hang it up on a roll. Very, very good advice. I think this just cuts right through a lot of the fog of this, doesn't bungle it up with extra rules to make it easier or harder mechanically to find clues. Just says let them find it. If they're trying really hard, let them find it. Then we get some monsters. Okay, monsters run. Okay, we get some listing of monsters here. One thing I noticed about the monsters, or about the listings, Dan sometimes uses target number, TN, abbreviation target number. Other times in the game he uses DC, difficulty class. So a little thing, and I figured out what they were the same thing. But okay, well, it's target number there too. So I did notice in a couple of places though in the game, sometimes it says difficulty, sometimes it says target number. Very minor thing. I think I would have kept the abbreviations the same. But anyway, there you go. There was something else about monsters that I wanted to bring up, and it's escaping me. Darn it, it went right out of my head. Target number is right there. I'm going to think of it after I do this whole review, and I'm going to be like, darn it, I forgot to mention that thing about the monsters. I remembered it. Dan in the game says some monsters always attack with advantage. However, advantage and disadvantage are never explained in the rules. Now, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons long enough to know that when something is done with advantage, you're rolling 2 dice and taking the better of the 2. And conversely, when you're doing something with disadvantage, you're rolling 2 dice and taking the lesser value of the 2. But you can see here's another one. This monster always attacks first with advantage. But again, advantage is not explicated in the rules. So if I was a newbie player, I'd say, what does he mean? What does this mean? Does this mean I get to add more skill, or what does this mean? We don't know. If you were just looking at this book, you wouldn't know. So I would say, just like magic needing a little extra explication, I would say this advantage and disadvantage by extension needs to be explained in the rules. Just a line or two. Doesn't have to be just a line or two with magic, just a line of text or two with advantage. Doesn't have to be anything. There's plenty of space in this to put that information. There's plenty of free space, and you're not bungling up the rules with lots of extras and fiddly bits. But those are critical things I think need to be in there. Then we get a nice color version of the character sheet. We get rules summary that you can stick right in front of you if you're the referee, which is nice. Just kind of gives you a little bit of everything, how you do things on one page. Isn't that wonderful? It gives you a very simple range of here and there. Kind of simple, but that's nice. Then we go into the adventure, the mystery scenario, Cloak House. And again, I am not going to go into this because I don't want to give away any spoilers. The one thing I would say generally about this is that the monsters are statted out a little bit differently than the monsters in the core section, which I thought was a little confusing. Like if you look at the monsters here, and again, I don't want to give stuff away. These are the supplied player characters, but can I get to the monsters? Let me see if I can find the monsters real quick. Okay, here's the monster. You'll see that the monsters here have, here again, here's DR instead of TN, difficulty rating, okay? Difficulty rating, not TN. So where TN was used in the other with the other monsters, here it's changed to DR. So there's that terminology that I would fix and make it consistent. Here, the monsters are given a skill rating, okay? In the other monsters, let me see if I can pull it back real quick. Sorry, a lot of page flipping here. Okay, the other monsters, again, here's the TN, not the DR, whatever that was. And there's no skill. There's no skill listed. So again, the game is simple enough that I could extrapolate and I could make it up. But it's jarring when you've got one set of stats here, and then it changes when you get to the scenario. That's a bit of a thing. So I would just go through. This is just an editing thing. I would just go through and make, and they're roughly compatible. I mean, you could figure it out with a little mental jump, but I would. Why make people do that? I would standardize and make it consistent. The other thing, the one last thing I would say about Cloak House is that, and again, I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of it. It's player versus player. As set up, the characters that you're going to play in this game, in this scenario, they all hate each other, and they all have an axe to grind, if you will, against one another. They're all at each other's throats. And when you're playing an investigatory horror scenario with monsters and supernatural things, player versus player has always kind of bugged me. I mean, if two players want to have their characters be at each other's throats, okay, but I wouldn't encourage it. I wouldn't set it up as part of the scenario, and that's what he does here. Now, this is a read-through. I've not played through this, so maybe if this was played through and everybody was playing that they were rivals and adversaries of one another, everyone would have a grand time and it would be a hoot. But just on a read-through, I would say, setting it up from page 1 that these player characters are out to get one another, and then have to go up and try to solve the mystery and deal with that and deal with the monsters and the horrors of what's going on in Cloak House. I find that investigation scenarios and campaigns work so much better when players cooperate, player characters cooperate, right? I mean, they can have disagreements and in on-camera squabbles and whatever. That's totally reasonable, but to kind of set them up like you can't stand this one, this one can't stand that one, and you end up trying to make them rivals and wanting to destroy one another in the context of the game. That just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And maybe playing it is a whole different thing, but player versus player, right from out the gates, and set up as a pretext, I don't like that. That's just, I would say it's kind of, I get what maybe it's fun, but it kind of if you're learning how to play investigation scenarios and you're brand new, saying, oh, your character hates this character and this character hates this character, that's not gonna, as far as working together as a team to solve a mystery or survive horrors, that's not gonna happen. So again, maybe if you play it, you have a grand time with that. But I have my doubts, or I have my reservations. So I think scenario aside, my big takeaways are: this is a very fun game, a very simple game. I say that as a term of praise, that it's so simple to run, and it's certainly got great art. It's very atmospheric. I would just clean up a few things editorially. I would see if do I add my occupational skills to my combat rating for defense as well as to hit things. I would ask that. If I'm skilled in dodging or unarmed combat or whatever, can I add that to my base defense if I'm entering a mode of combat where I might need that number? So there you go. So there's that. I would also work out just exactly how does spellcasting work exactly, like who's making that roll, and if they make their roll, does the other side get to defend with its own roll? Because it's like half of it's here and half of it's in the scenario with the monster, and I can't tell what the sequence is, honestly. I mean, I can kind of guess and I can make it up, but where it's okay, are people reacting here to a monster's spell, which seems to automatically go off without any rolls, and then the player has to make a roll to resist, or does the enemy have to make their own roll to make the spell go off? But then if it does, there's nothing in here about resisting. So it's kind of like in two places, and it's a bit, well, which way is it, I guess. Now, I'm going to have to make my own decision as a game master, as a referee, and I can do that very, very easily. But I would just fix that with a line or two. But overall, this is a great game. It's a great deal. It's only like $6, maybe $7. I think it's like $6 though, as of the time of this video. And Dan's got his own video promoting it on his page, his YouTube page, which I'll put in my notes. I'll put where that is. So, but I would say this is a great game. If you want a fast game of Lovecraftian horror, and your players are used to D20 games, and you want to especially use this game with all the Call of Cthulhu stuff on your bookshelf, or any other sort of game that uses that scale, because the hit points use the same scale, you're in good shape. So this would be a really fun game to either make stuff up on your own, or if you have a bookshelf full of Lovecraftian gaming material from Call of Cthulhu or Cthulhu Eternal or other D100 scale games, you can bring it right over to this hack, if you will, this self-proclaimed hack, which brings it into it simplifies it. It adds, it uses a simple D20 roll high mechanic, which a lot of gamers are used to. It's for the most part, it's very clean. There's a couple of key areas I would change, add an explication, a line or two here and there. But overall, you're going to do very, very, very well with this game. This is a fun game, and I think right now, if they could add just a little bit about that whole thing about skill, do you add it to defend, and maybe fix up that fix up that stuff about spell casting with a line or two of how that actually works, this could be a grand slam. And again, maybe, add make this consistent. The stat block for the monsters there and the monsters in the adventure, the included adventure. So, all right, this has been a very long-winded, rough and dirty look at the Eldritch Hack. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you get this game. Go out and get it. It's cheap, and I mean cheap in a good way, like inexpensive but worth your. It's a great buy, and I think you could have a lot of fun with it. So, thank you very much. Take care.